Recording, and I'll bring back up Moodle. And
It's recording? Okay.
yes.
Gabby, you should see something on the screen.
Thank you.
I'm able to see the Moodle dashboard for this course.
That's what you should see, okay. Right, the first part I'm going to do is cover some lecture information on chapters 1 through 6 in the student personnel points of view. And then we'll get into discussion about the syllabus, because the people that were here last week may have had their questions answered, and I don't want to keep you and have you here through again. We'll take care of the content area first. The book I'm referring to mostly today is the Handbook for Student Administrative Affairs. It is available electronically if you don't want to purchase it. It's a fairly good book for providing basic information, and I don't know if you've attended my lectures before, but I don't go page by page. I try to pick out the points that I think could be misunderstood or interpreted in different ways, and I do expect y'all to participate in discussion. There'll be certain points along the way where I'm going to ask you, well, what do you think about this? And you're welcome to jump in, including you, Gabby. When it starts out the history in chapter 1, it writes about basically the goals for students and their families is to try to figure out what can we do to get this person graduated. And so there's an expectation that colleges produce graduates. But if you look across the country, there's a certain percentage, like only about 44% of the students who start college in Louisiana graduate. So about 56% don't. But yet, every one of those students entered the college with the expectation, and their family had an expectation, and society had an expectation that they would graduate. And so the big push for student affairs is to try to figure out what can and should be done on college campuses to increase the success rate of students. Because remember, the university system has a selective admissions process. So the faculty in the state has identified ability demonstration criteria that people have to meet. Certain ACT, ICT score, grade point average. So we're basically saying at that point you're ready to do college level work. So what's the primary hindrance, or what are the factors that have a negative influence on student success? Is it something in the classroom? Is it something outside of the classroom? Is it financial? Is it socioeconomic status driven? Do people need more and additional information on vocational choices? And the list goes on and on and on. But the long-term expectation by society and by government, because remember we're state-supported institutions, and then the federal government appropriates a whole lot of money to the Department of Education in the form of Pell Grants, student loans, research grants, is that there's an expectation that the people engaging in this experiment called higher education are going to make an impact in their communities, and in the long run an impact on the world. It used to be an impact on the communities in the country, but as we get into historical perspectives, I'll explain how it shifted to an impact on the world. And how are people supposed to make differences? As student affairs professional, you're going to hear the terminology teachable moments. Kiwanis has a thing that we're improving communities one child at a time, one community at a time. Well, student affairs professionals, in addition to administering programs and services and planning and developing things and trying to take away roadblocks and hindrances, are expected to take advantage of the one-on-one teachable moments to make a difference in students' lives. That's discussed on page 3. On page 4, they use terminology that student affairs administrators are specialists. We used to not always be considered specialists. We were supposed to just be able to take care of, in the old days when it was referred to student personnel work, we were just expected to do what was necessary to help students get through the adjustment period so that they could get through their freshman year, because we all know if they make it to their freshman year, the graduation rate goes up from about 44% to about 65-70%. And so the first year experience was the big focus in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, and even as late as the 2000s. And so what happened is, over time, as populations grew, because when you look at the history of the development of education, higher education, the first colleges were basically small communities. 300-400 was considered a large institution. I think they write that in 1770 there were 413 students in Harvard and 330 something in Yale. And the one significant thing you notice is that they were all white males, because at that time that's who went to college. That's who needed to be educated for society to succeed at that point in our development as a nation and as society as a whole. Women from affluent backgrounds went to finishing schools or colleges overseas. African Americans were basically not educated. I think they pointed out that something like until 1770, there was only like 25 African Americans that finished a baccalaureate degree in the United States. And so when we talk about the history of higher ed, it started out as basically a white male experience. And so if you have a homogeneous group and you're dealing with it, you can make certain rules and regulations, you can look at basic characteristics. You don't have issues of diversity, you don't have issues of differences. At that time, tuition was either paid for by the family, or they would work on around the college or on the farm or whatever and provide the food and stuff that was needed. Basically, you could run it with your eyes closed. They didn't have a lot of things to do, but even in those days, they started having behavior issues, because what do the college students do when they're not in class and not working? And thus became the original student personnel or student affairs working in small communities. It wasn't until, I'll look at the little comments they have around page 5, that when women administrators were hired to deal with the women, because the men didn't know how to deal with the women, and women started going to the male colleges. Right. And so they had to figure out ways to have the college change to fit the needs of women. But the basic responsibilities by the dean of men was to shepherd the transition of these older boys into young men. So it was more of like a behavior shaping experience from a discipline perspective for the guys, but for the women, what do we have to do to provide them an experience? And of course, there's still a lot of people, unfortunately, that think that way. Specialized training in the profession didn't come about until around 1910, 1913, when I think the first graduate program came about. And one of the big things is that initially college was for the highly wealthy, highly educated families, the ministers, because remember there was a religious background to it. And so there wasn't a lot of vocational training. Ben Franklin formed the American Academy, which was the first high school in America in the 1760s, which eventually developed into the secondary school, because it was going to become a place where people would learn vocations, and where it wouldn't just be vocations wouldn't be passed down just from an apprentice relationship, but from an apprentice and an education organized relationship. And so as more and more people started to go to colleges, they started spending more money, and it started costing the states, because remember, we don't have a federalized system of education in America. We have a state-by-state system. There's some federal oversight that's inched in over the years, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. But basically, as enrollment increased, and I think they pointed out between 1945 and 1946, enrollment in colleges doubled in America. Anybody want to guess why? World War II ended. So you had these millions of GIs who were coming back.
And they now get
GI benefits.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, if you have 2 or 3 million GIs coming back, the women had moved into a lot of men's jobs. You had your high school seniors graduating, and at the time, about only 20% went to college, so the other 80% needed to have jobs. And they just weren't that many jobs, and they had just come through the Great Depression in the 30s. And so they tried to figure out, what can we do before we have anarchy? Because if once a certain percentage of the population becomes uninvested in society, anarchy develops. People have take power, assume power, control power, and then again from 46 to 47, the enrollment increased 70%. A lot of it had to do with the GI benefits, and so then we had the end of World War II from the standpoint of you had the United States versus this evil of doom, the Soviet Union, and communism. And so then that became a national expectation that was added to the responsibilities for student affairs professionals who weren't only supposed to help people graduate and find their way and navigate through the university community. We were expected to help them become good citizens and then go out and support democracy and have a global impact in society. That was the 1949 student personnel point of view. We'll get into that in a little while. And so there became expectations from society. It became a community expectation. The federal government started to invest in the sciences. This is not the first time STEM has come about. Maybe the first time they called it STEM, but you have to remember we had the big military-industrial complex race. We had to train engineers. We developed our highway interstate system in the 1950s, primarily in the 1950s, early 60s. You had tons of people going to college who were all first-time generation college students. You had poor white folks, you had poor black folks, you had poor females all going to college that had never had that opportunity. And so that saw a boom in the development of the two-year colleges, because not all of those GIs, just because they were in the military, don't mean they were educated or could actually read and write. And so they had to have industrial and vocational training. So the United States had two things. One, we had this big industrial relations boom that started in the 1870s with the industrial age, and then continued in World War I, and then we had the Great Depression when the economy tanked, and then we came out of it. The war put people to work, put everybody to work, including a lot of women who had never been out in the workforce before. They had been in a lot of jobs, but not in the traditional jobs. And so then you have what are universities doing from a vocational standpoint? Are colleges producing graduates that match the needs of the local, regional, state, and countrywide economy? Because if not, then why is the state and federal government investing in these universities? We have to produce graduates in the sciences, the maths, the biologies, the chemistries, the physics, because we have to keep up with the Russians. We have to keep up in competition with the Iron Curtain. Then you had the space program. The space program had a tremendous impact. A lot of the things that we have today are from the space program. Think a lot of the TV series, whether it was Star Trek. What do you think those little things they open up and say, "Beam me up, Scotty"? It's a flip phone. And then, you had things like the Flintstones. How close are we to Flintstones? We're pretty close. And the Jetsons. Okay. And so there was an expectation in society that student affairs professionals would help provide vocational guidance. Match people's characteristics and likes with their abilities and their interests, and help get them to complete a degree so they can get a job. So, higher education took a vocational interest. Well, that didn't just happen in the 1950s. If you go back until after the Civil War, when the United States recognized land-grant colleges, Louisiana State University Agriculture and Mechanical School, Alabama University Mechanical School, Oklahoma State Agriculture and Mechanical School, Texas State. So University of Michigan Agriculture and Mechanical School. So they gave a certain amount of money, a certain amount of land was set aside when territories and states would form. If you go back and read history, they set aside 1/16 of the town and corporation's land area for the development of schools. Initially K through 12 schools, but eventually universities. And then when Plessy versus Ferguson came about in 1895-96, separate but equal opportunities, that's where historically black institutions, land-grant institutions came about. Southern University Agriculture and Mechanical School. They were supposed to do the same thing as the white, but because there was still a belief in our society that separate but equal is equal. The parallel of the development of the historically black schools paralleled that of the white schools, for the most part. Now, they didn't have as much money, but they had to meet the same expectations. They had, and then of course in the South you had a higher population. Nationally, I would say our national population is only about 13 African Americans, according to the last census. Now, that doesn't account for Spanish, Asians, et cetera, et cetera. You have a heavier population in the South of African Americans than you do elsewhere in the country. And so a lot of the Southern agriculture mechanical schools became the educational opportunity for a lot of blacks in our society. And so people like Lucy Dick Snow at Howard University, at the turn of the century, what was funny is that, it's not funny, it's sort of sarcastically funny, is that, I don't know if you could believe this or not, but the women deans were a lot more collaborative and organized and deliberative about the administration of their programs and services. It's like they planned out their success. The men deans sort of woofed it, like they were coaching football teams. And so if you trace the history of student personnel, professional associations, professional training, specialized education, you're going to find, excuse me one second. Terry, is it an emergency? I'm in class. Can I call you back in about an hour and a half? All right. That was my son. He spoke something about yesterday. And so when we look at development of programs and services and the organization and specialized training, it's rooted in Esther Lloyd Jones and Lucy Dick Snow and people like that who codified what was supposed to happen, and that's where the 1937 student personnel point of view came. There were 23 specific areas of expectation that developed out of it. What do you think the impact on campus would be? Suppose you were at Nichols and we're a school of about 6,500, and next year we had 13,000 students. Give me some ideas of some things we have to do. But you can't build buildings in a 4-month time period. The war just ended. We now have millions of people coming to college. So what do you think student affairs role would be in that?
You would have to increase the amount of teachers there to cut in student personnel to cover the increase in personnel.
What else?
We need
Class sizes, maybe bigger.
all
Class times, when classes meet. We probably have a lot more classes offering in the afternoon. Everybody tries to get home by noon.
That's really true.
They want to see Oprah and Ellen.
There's so much parking immediately after the
I believe
Or
it.
like Karen.
Or they'd implement rules like just before I got to college, freshmen couldn't get cars.
Yeah.
They had to ride buses. Maybe that'd be
I
okay.
know.
to re-implement those rules.
We'd have to have more places to park, less emergency parking.
We'd have to schedule when people could have lunch. And because you can't build cafeterias, once we hit about 8,000, we're at our max from the service industry standpoint. You can only sit so many people in some of the seats. Well, think about the challenges that they had. And then you have people, you're going from a homogeneous group where 90% of the people prior to World War II were from upper middle class income. And then you're going to bring blacks, Hispanic, and white trash to school. I'm from Shannon, I'm not going to get further white trash. The vice president on campus no time to call me white trash and Shannon. I'm not proud of it. And so then you have people with different interests, different needs. Everybody likes to be associated with the group. That still exists today. Though we're an integrated campus, and I think for the most part, most of the roadblocks have been removed, the institutional roadblocks anyway, that have been removed from people being able to enroll and go to school and earn a
agree.
When you go sit in the student union, what do people do? They gather with people like them.
Clicks, yeah.
There are cliques based on where you live in. If you live in down the bayou, or you live in Thibodeau, or you're Greek and non-Greek, or you're white and black. The non-traditional students don't want to hang out with the kids. They want their own little section. The international students are trying to fit in any way they can because they don't have the support group and activities, and they have to not only adjust to school, they have to adjust to the culture. And we have to be a weird people to international students. We really are, because where they come from, they have different countries, so they have different languages, different customs, and they're very respectful of it. Whereas in America, the custom is whatever the people who are engaging with you at the moment. I got people in Texas, they think and do things differently than Louisiana. And in New Orleans, they definitely do things different than they do in Lafayette. Not just with the food either. And so, as student affairs professionals, we have to adjust, we have to make adjustments to the campus. Physical adjustments, staffing adjustments, program offering adjustments, personal assistance adjustments, financial aid adjustments, just to get the basic. I'm not talking about getting high order level needs taken care of. I'm talking about just to get the basic things organized. And then we hit the 1960s. I call it the Age of Enlightenment in America. When I was a little kid growing up, if the government released a statement saying it was 80 degrees outside today and sunny, we were supposed to agree that it was 80 degrees and sunny. Because if we disagreed with the government, we had to be communists or socialists, or worse than that, a hippie. And so you had the whole questioning where you had a lot more people suddenly educated who would ask questions. You had a lot more people who had access to information. They could call their relatives in California. Might have been a party line. That's where three or four people had access to the same telephone. I didn't know who it was, but you could listen in the conversation. And, but they could call, or they could get on a Greyhound bus and go find out what's really happening in California, or New Jersey, or New York, or go visit relatives in Ohio. And so then we had this thing called the Vietnam War. And the age of television came about. And so for the first time in America's history, the war wasn't reported 3 or 4 days later. What was happening in Vietnam was actually appearing on 5 o'clock news that day. Because remember, they're 12 hours ahead of us. So it's almost like when it's nighttime over here, it's 5 o'clock in the morning over there. And so people begin to question how truthful our government was being to it. And then you had the threats from Russia, you had the great space age race where we had to be first, or the communists were going to take over the world. They had the assassinations of Kennedy, the attempted assassination of Wallace. And so it was very unstable time. And then take with that the civil rights movement. Civil rights movement tore our country apart. It needed to be, but there was a lot of question because people basically hate change. To show you how simple it is, if we took a break 15 minutes from now, and these 4 people sat inside the room, they would look at them like, what's everyone in my place? Because people, we like to be free to do what we want to do, but we like a sense of order and structure. It's sort of like we want to be on the bowling alley with the buffalo. Because we don't want to strike out. We want to make strikes, not feel good about it. We don't like to be told we have to use the bumpers, but we sure do appreciate them when the guy next to us fails and we don't. And so you had the civil rights movement, you had the age of enlightenment with information available to the public to make their own decisions. You had the question of the government for the first time in the history of our society. You had the civil rights movement. And then came the New Society Bill legislation, where a lot of the things that they were doing for the GI Bill, they started offering to the general population, like Pell Grants, It used to be called Basic Education Opportunity Grants, BED. So that's what we felt like we were doing. Then the National Student Loan Program made it possible for a lot of people to borrow money and go to school. And so you had, for the first time, an expectation that government was supposed to govern, but not be our big brother, not watch over us all the time. You had a rejection by youth in America that they weren't going to be told to do what to do because they were adults. I think it's the 26th Amendment that allows us right to vote, but I'm going to look it up. I don't get it wrong. For 18 years to vote, that was radical. Because up until about 1975, they had this terminology called local collectives. And students went away to school, the surrogate parents were the student personnel and the deans of the university. Because they look at 26. Because there was an expectation that you had to be guided, that you weren't really an adult to make decisions on your own. That the young people in America sit and said, if you can pack us up, ship us in a sardine and die in Vietnam, then we must be old enough to make our own decisions. You know, that's why I disagree with the drinking age and smoking age of 21 and all that stuff. Because if you're old enough to go to war and die for your country at 18, you're old enough to make your own decisions. Just philosophical wise. There are some people who are 50 that are still in the field. I'm older than 50. Just hit the stop and it'll save it?
Right there, and then it'll pop up and you just save it.
Okay. The little button.
Yeah, that one.
Pop up.
I don't want to touch it.
All right. So that's one of the skills that we've been working on. And so there's an expectation. And then you have the cultural clash between the historic, each institution's different. Well, all of y'all in graduate school, how many of y'all went to a different undergraduate institution? So there's a different, you experienced a different institutional environment at that institution. Nichols is unique, every other institution is unique. The picture can be unique based on its historical development. It can be unique based on traditions of the campus, whether it's male or female. I remember when I went to Florida State, it used to be Florida College for Women until 1948. My professor was one of the last professors that was there in 1948. She said, the men ruined it. Because Florida State's known as the liberal arts student, so that's why they call it ACC and not the SEC. And so you have a historical development. I guarantee you, if you're a first-time freshman and you go to Fletcher, you have a very different institutional experience than if you go to LSU. And you have a different experience at LSU than you do at Nichols. Not saying one's better or worse than the other. But what was supposed to happen is schools were supposed to make adjustments. The faculty weren't going to adjust how they were teaching, or what they were teaching, or the grades they were given, or the environment they were teaching in. And so there had to be some structure in universities, and that's where the student affairs discussion came from. Who's going to handle everything from the registration to the financial aid, to athletics, to fraternities, to sororities, to students with disabilities, to veterans, to financial aid? The faculty didn't have time to do that anymore. They weren't the Harvard where they only had 412 students. If I had a school of 412 students, I could process the financial aid schedule, register and handle the student activities all in one day. Especially with computers. And the other days you had to walk around with a signature. And so universities were challenged. They were challenged to change. And so a lot of the faculty had fought back on the campus because they didn't want things to change. Because again, we all sit in the Colby job every day because we're comfortable driving that car. But if somebody puts us in an 18-wheel semi or a dump truck, we're going to go, whoa! Still got at least 4 wheels and an engine in the steering wheel and brakes. but it's a different experience. It's a different experience. What do you think would be distinctive? What would you say? Y'all have all been here at least. Well, some of y'all may be new this semester, but I think all y'all have been here at least the fall. What's different about Nichols from a student perspective than what you had at your undergraduate student? Start with your friend. Okay, so what did you like about Nichols?
It was like it's a smaller school and it felt really welcoming because I came from 5 hours away, so I knew no one. I wasn't from a high school or anything. But I felt just from the get go, everyone was like super welcoming and inviting. Like, we want you to go here. This is our typical community or the community. Like, I felt very comfortable.
Who went to a big institution? You went to Yale Lafayette. Or programs and services offered differently?
Yeah, it's like, I guess I just watch her just because she was having class because can't be surveyed like she's on the connectors and my class is on like the South campus. So
That's a
there's
good
those
one.
things you like look up on the website. It's pretty much their way of doing their classroom here. As for like teachers here, like we freshman class, like I did my freshman year here also, but supervisors haven't told us like where to go, who to talk to here. This is smaller, I guess, and then you guys like the first year lesson. I went to Texas State. It was pretty good.
That's a big deal for 30-something thousand.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. And I felt like it wasn't, it's not as hands-on, kind of like what she was saying. It's not as, where you feel like everything at hand reach. Like I graduated from my undergrad, and then after that, I started finding out there were like 8 different things I could have done to get scholarships and stuff. Like just random stuff. And I was like, I don't know how I would have known
But I
that.
guarantee you, Texas State people were interested in helping students succeed.
Most definitely.
But they had 30-something thousand as compared to 6,000.
But it's hard to get to it. Right. It's hard to get to every single person and everybody that we have these types of services.
Well, part of it is they're not willing to invest to have the same ratio of staff to students. They tend to have larger classes. Like I remember, even when I was at UL Lafayette in the 70s, our biology class probably had 175 people. Which is small, but you get LSU, you don't have a freshman biology class like 800. But there are some people that argue with you, the caliber of student who's going to go to LSU should be able to learn on their own. Just get out of the way, provide me information. If it's based on regurgitation information. But even at LSU, if you go to the College of Nursing, they have the same clinical restrictions and requirements. For athletic training, they're going to have, if they're going to be certified through the association, they're going to have to use the same basic requirements. And so there's an expectation in different services and activities. There are some people, like in this class, for some of you, there's no reason for you to come sit and listen to the lecture because you can get it on your own. That's rare. Not because I'm the only one who can give you the information. It's just that there's something from a give and take discussion that occurs that forces us to think about something differently than our normal pattern of thinking about things. And so you're going to have different services on campus. I guarantee you, if you're at LSU and you try to see the dean, you're going to have to go through 3 or 4 people probably.
You know, you could talk to our president at Texas State. It was like a big situation before we got out because people were really upset that they couldn't talk to him. You just can't. Like, it's not like this, which they come to like the volleyball game. Like, you don't do that at that level. There's like a lot of problems with that.
Yeah, they'll go to the TV. They'll go to the football game that's on TV.
Oh, yeah. They'll be there in the press box away from everybody, but they're not gonna, there's no, I'm gonna tell you some of my concerns here, and you're gonna listen. That's not a thing at Texas State. Versus here, if there was listening going on, I think she would at least be there. You know what I'm saying?
What they offer, Texas State offers, if you look at their program offerings, they offer a lot of the same programs and services.
Yeah.
Except the difference is, At a bigger institution, they're going to provide you a menu and you find it online and you find out what else you go and you get the help you need. Whereas at a small institution, people are going to recognize that you have an ego problem and you're more likely to be proactive, inclusive advising and assistance. Just like in the academic advising center, they have early warning signs. The LSU, the only early warning sign you're going to do is your car's going to tow away in 5 minutes. And it's not being critical of other than LSU, it's just that the model of business operation is different. It's just like there are some people, it's sort of like, I love Walmart, but I hate Walmart. I love it because I can find what I want to find there, but I hate having to look for it, especially when they change the setup of the store right after I've done where everything was. Well, it's the same thing on the college campus. And so generally what happens is you have a bunch of people that come to the school because they read on a website or they have a recruiter visit or they take a tour and they're sold the new car. And when they get in it, they find out the brakes don't work, so they're going to change cars. And so there's a lot of people that transfer in and out of institutions because it would chip into those people refer to as business of fit. Students vote with their feet. They may not vote in any election, but if they show up at an institution and they find out that they don't get the program assistance that they need in and out of the classroom, they're going to go someplace else. And they may not go anyplace else, but I mean they may enroll someplace else. Because they just decide to go online, which is a whole nother challenge that's coming to students especially. A lot of these schools have tons of online students. But the Accrediting Association, and actively involved with accreditation visits and going on another visit this semester, there's an expectation that if she's an in-class student, or she's Gabby, hey Gabby, that she's going to have, they both have the benefit of the same information and the same learning opportunity, and if they need assistance, I'm going to interact with both of them in some form or fashion that provides them the same level of advice, concern, consideration, tutorial assistance, etc. So if you're going to give a degree from Texas State, whether they're an online or off-campus student, you're supposed to make available as an institution in the section of accreditation in here, I think it's chapter 5 or 6. There's an expectation that your school that's offering an online degree is offering the same quality and variety of programs and services as somebody who's sitting in the seat. And if you're not, then you're going to have accreditation issues. You'll have difficulty being reaffirmed for accreditation. And so you're finding a lot of institutions are now offering counseling services online. You're having some med centers on college campuses where they have video docs. That's happening in the real world. You dial it from home, you zoom in. The doctor says, have you taken your temperature? You have your own little thermometer. Doctor says, this is how you take your pulse, your heart rate. Describe to me what's going on. Okay, turn around. Let me check you. Put your finger in this app that I just sent to you. It's measuring the oxygen concentration level. We need further assistance, so we're going to have to send you those somewhere to get tests, and we'll send your test results electronically to the doctor. And they prescribe you medical treatment online. Sometimes I'd probably rather see the doctor online. At least I know I'll give them one there rather than wait for an hour. Doctors are terrible business people. As a group. They make a lot of money. So you have issues of each institution can be different. Like, Lauren, have you thought about what type of institution you're going to work at when you grow up and get like me? That's what you're talking about. A place like Memphis. Because What if you had a chance to go work in an advisor position at Fletcher, where they deal with 90% of things? And so you're interested in working in the student affairs profession that's going to provide advice, guidance, coaching skills for prospective students. Well, that can get better at Harvard. Because Harvard is a little different. And so I guess the point I'm trying to make is that the needs of students are basically the same no matter where they go to college. And they're the same because they're different. Each person's going to be unique, and that's the biggest change in the profession over the years. It used to be we provide this service. We have tutoring from 4 to 5 to show up from 4 to 5. Now we have to do it on personalized appointments. And you get with somebody one-on-one. The tutorial sessions used to be group sessions primarily. And so everybody wants their needs taken care of when they want it. I call it the Burger King generation. We want it our way, when we want it, without cheese. But when people tell me that, I go, is that an idealistic or a realistic view of the world? And they go, what do you mean? I go, well, you like having it your way. Did you make that menu up, or did Burger King make that menu up? Next time you go, tell me you want a Whopper with a piece of chicken on it. And then you go, we don't serve that. Look on the menu and order from it. So there's a big difference in life and in society as to whether you get to set the menu or get to choose from a menu based on what somebody else thinks that you want to eat. Most of the students you're going to deal with in the 21st century they're not used to sharing. Y'all haven't had a chance to look at the old dormitories and the old residence halls. That had stronger senses of community because people interacted and you were forced to interact with each other. Whereas a typical college freshman doesn't want to share a bedroom, doesn't want to share a bathroom, will not share their phone with you because if you want to have capital punishment, take somebody's phone away from them. You know, if they don't get their way, mom is calling you. What's that? Mama calls. And every time mama calls me, and every time mama calls me in the 40 plus years I've been doing this since 1977, I've always asked mom, where's Mike? This is an officer, come see me, they'll call you back. And then before Mike leaves the office, we try to take care of the needs, the interests, the help that's needed. But always leaving with, and this is your plan and how you handle it next time you think of it. If you wanted your mama to make all your decisions, you'd be living at home. Do you really want your mom in your business? You do? Okay, well, should we call and tell her how many times you missed an English class? Oh, no. And so we live in a society where the typical American college student is very Zoom targeted. What I mean by Zoom targeted, they want to be an accountant because they want to be an accountant. I can't tell you why they want to be an accountant, they just want to be an accountant. And then they spend 3.5 years in accounting, and then decide their last year's up. And they have to go out and do their internship, their externship to go. I hate this. But when we try to talk to you about considering other things, you hate math and you're going to be an accountant? Well, we're just going to punch things in. That's called an accounting assistant or receptionist. That's not an accountant. Accountants have to think and make decisions based on regulations. And so this whole model of student affairs developed from the standpoint of from the local parentis, which is using place of the parents in Latin, to support development of the whole person, not only teaching them information, but how to use it. The schools are expected to help students develop holistically. You've probably heard that word before. Socially, spiritually, financial responsibility-wise, with the new things being pushed on. And so what that's forced the profession to do is to make it a specialized profession. When I first started in student affairs, you work 2 or 3 years in housing, then you go to student union, student activities, then you go to group life, then you go to financial aid, and you were a generalist first, and a specialist later, whereas now everybody wants to specialize in everything. And it's good because then you can be really good at what you're doing, but do you really want to spend 40 years of your life doing the same thing and not have new challenges coming in your life on a daily basis? I had the job I had and had because there was never a dull day, and never one day did I go home and felt like I was finished. Because then it kept me thinking what we're going to have to do the next day. The models that we face, because some of you are going to work at international universities, there are some places where they've adopted the European model, and there are 2 basic models that came from Europe. There's the British or English model, and then there's the German model. The German model was based primarily more on research, a lot of emphasis on scientific method of inquiry. They could care less about how you feel, what you want, it's what the science shows. Whereas the British model had some of the science, but from the standpoint of what does it mean for the big picture? You know, the Germans would be we're going to develop this bomb. The British would talk about how they're going to use it. And it's the moral and ethical things about using it and not using it. And then we have a lot of international exchange programs. What is internationalization of the campus mean? What do y'all think it means?
The teaching that you're allowing other teaching from other nations, other countries, and being able to use that to further the lessons, further your teaching.
Okay. Somebody else want to add to it? It's in Chile. The universities operate differently there. So, do they ever talk about internationalizing the community, or they focus primarily on
I mean, they
the
do have
children?
international programs as well. They do have like student things that you can actually go and do your thesis in another country and stuff like that. They do give you opportunities. They do have like some plans, like educational plans to go to universities from Canada and stuff like that. So it's easier for students to go and do a program degree in Canada or finish up in Canada or Spain if they have like deals with their education.
In Chile, if I remember from the report correctly, there's national tests that determine who's eligible to go to specific types of universities. And if you don't make the score, you don't get in. And it doesn't prevent you from going to a private university because you can't have the money to send you. But if you want to go to the state institutions, you have to earn it, so to speak.
There's actually like so the students always have to take it in December, and this year they haven't been able to take it because there's a lot of classes going on in Korea from the same students, either higher education or like high school, but they actually included the test in the entire country with the process and stuff, so they haven't been able to do it, and it's the first time that it actually happens, so nobody knows what's going to happen at the end. This is the only way that you get to be able to go to university, and they are not allowing other students to take it. But
They don't have the opportunity, and they have to go to a whole nother year.
yeah.
What is the risk? Should anybody be eligible to come to Nickel? Why else should? What question?
It is.
they're not qualified. There ain't nobody here anyway. It's kind of like,
You said you had no. Why you saying that?
because, so I'm invited to Damien, and so we teach freshmen, and some freshmen, when I came to see today, that got like accepted, and he didn't meet the scores, but somebody accepted him, and he's just not doing well in classes, and I don't know, like college just isn't something for some people. I think you have to really test in. So.
Why would a kid like that go through the process of applying and the orientation and the adjustment course?
Because I see that a lot.
Why do you think that parents have that pressure? Why do you think parents want their kids to go to college even though they may not be qualified? Because college, it means something. It means that it generally means you're a little higher social status. What's the benefit to society from the 8 people in the same finishing a college degree?
I mean, my opinion is more like, if you go to college and you're gonna have a good job, and if you have a good job, then you're gonna have
That's the quote unquote American dream.
Yeah.
That's the concept, but it doesn't always work in that manner. You know, in that particular situation, the kid he isn't doing well. So what the parent needs to do is also not just push college, but put career discovery, career
Like vocational
expertise.
schools, I think anybody should be able to get in because you're learning a trade. You're learning how to do a job. Here it's just higher education, you're not necessarily learning how to, I mean, like nursing's kind of different, you're learning how to do it, but like anything else really, you're just getting.
There's typically been a historical belief by parents that we want our kids to be more successful than we are. And education has been seen as the key because when you go to the bank or you go talk to a teacher or you go to work for a boat company, the managers and the people making the big bucks and driving the nice cars and having nice houses and being able to take care of health care are generally people who have degrees. Not every person has to be successful. It doesn't guarantee you're going to be successful. It's just like a union card. You get your foot in the door, so to speak.
That's what I was gonna say. I feel like I don't think college has taught me very much, but I've met so many people, and that's why I'm here right now. It's not anything I learned in college. It's because I met someone who wanted me to follow them here because I was good at what I did there in sport. Like that it had absolutely nothing to do with my actual degree. Almost everything in my life has been because of who I know and experience in the presence of people who I've had.
And for some of the prestigious schools, there is that network, post-graduation network.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
Just like there's a network among fraternities, sororities.
Which is why I agree that I feel like college is good, but I'm not even saying that it's good because you're going to get more education. I think it's just good because you might run into somebody that can get you where you need to go. Even this guy right here who might not have, he might be not doing well, but there might be somebody that's looking at him that's like, you know what? I know where he can go right now, get a job, da da da. And he might end up getting out, and he at least met somebody. He might meet somebody in this time.
From 1994 to 2012, that's 18 years. 1 out of 2 kids who started kindergarten in Louisiana finished high school. 1 out of 2. That other 50% is still going to have housing needs, food needs, medical needs. And if they can't make it through the regular channels of business and society, they're going to make it through the underground economy. And 31% of kids in Louisiana live out of the local poverty. 1 out of 3 kids are. Now, if you talk to most of the poor kids, they don't know they're poor because it's just life. You know, little kids are very resilient and much more resilient than adults are. And so, for all those poor families, the only way they see their kids getting out is to get an education. And there are all benefits to society. People who have, the more someone is educated, the less likely they are to participate in crime. They're more likely to not have to take advantage of public assistance, so it's a saving. They're going to generate income from earnings and pay taxes. They're going to buy houses, buy cars, which keep other people at work. And so there is the public, but then that's the individual. So that's been the big argument in states. And there's the economy in the South, there was a national movement, and it happened in Louisiana too. Tuition went up 10% a year for 8 years. So because we're in a poor state, are we eliminating opportunities for people just because they can't afford it? When I went to school, you could work your way through college. There's not enough hours in a day to work your way through college. And so are we limiting higher education in America? When I finished a bachelor's degree, I had no debt, no loan debt. It's very unusual to find somebody that doesn't have a loan debt. Because of the cost of going to school, minimum wage is not kept up with it. Pell Grants were $5,500 15 years ago, and now they're $5,900. Things are going up more than 4% a year. And so there's a way that politicians and institutions can shape who attends their schools. I can be based in Thibodeau, Louisiana, and tell you, we're going to serve the needs of the people of the region. But if the car I'm selling costs too much money, there ain't nobody going to be able to buy it. And if they don't buy my cars, then my business is not going to be going along. And I mean, I always keep floundering. And I'm going to hire less people. And the job market's going to be fluid, except the big business in South Louisiana is the oil industry. And so a lot of the people that don't finish, it has to do with money. And then you take the poor people, or the ones that borrow as much as they can, they get the Pell Grant, and it's still not enough to pay anything, so they're holding a job working 30, 40 hours a week. When they ought to be studying, sleeping, be participating in activities. And so we can break down all the barriers we want to break down from a student perspective at college, by making tutoring available, providing advisors available, providing coaching available, providing sports, providing activities to make people feel a part of the community. But if they can't pay the tuition, they can't enroll. And then you put them out as a young professional with a $30,000 loan debt that's going to take them 15 years to pay off. So instead of buying a house, they're paying a loan back from school. So how are we making it better for society when we're taking our educated people and basically saying as a society, we know you're not going to buy a new car for the first 10 years unless you buy something on lease. We know you're not going to buy a house. You're going to be living check to check for the first 15 years of your professional career unless you're in a really high-paying job. How does that benefit society? And I think part of it is it's a national issue now. The average college graduate graduates with $30,000 in debt. If you pay $250 a month with no interest, that's still 10 years. That's your cost. That's half of your insurance. That's another issue. Insurance in Louisiana is like double the national average, but that's another night. You got to pay taxes on your casket. They got to pay.
You can realize that they still have to pay some money. You might not be.
You know, you have to pay sales tax on a casket.
That's crazy. I didn't know that. I was like, well, that's what you don't get. That's it, right?
I told my wife.
Still around here trying to find somebody to take it.
I told my wife, cremate me or donate me signs. I'm like Walker, the shell's gone. What are some reasons and things why people stay on campus, and what does student personnel have responsibilities for making a difference? I'm referring to chapter 3 and 4. There are different challenges. Let me see, page 49 and 65.
And this is what the thing is really because they want to stay at home. They want to have their sense of independence. Some students stay on campus because of the distance. They travel a certain amount of ways to, come to the institution, realize that the commute or 4 hour, 3, 4 hour commute, that don't work. I need to have to stay on campus. So we stay on campus for a sense of, developing friendships and relationships from that perspective. They, the only child, right? The only child, when it gets on campus, and you have to know that makes some lifelong friendships. I think that's pretty much what I can truly think of. But I will say I know from personal experience, from friends, friends that I know, because I went to ULM, I asked him like, hey, bro, you from Monroe, why are you staying on campus? And his main reason was because the independence, but also there's from a quality standpoint, we didn't have it on room.
We had their own room.
Right.
They had to help take care of other kids.
Yeah,
Family responsibility.
Exactly. So I was
and also
there.
have a job.
Good. So him staying on room, they kind of gave him a sense of, independence, but also some form of peace away from the background that we come from. So I think sometimes that is a factor as well for some of our students who come from those types of backgrounds where they're living in those conditions where they don't have their own home. They have to take care of the younger children. They have to work. They have to take on so much responsibility because the person that they get to get out, they take it. Regardless if they could save money or not, they realize the benefit of being on campus is much greater than staying at home because they have such a load. So that's my perspective.
Environmentally, there are different components of the environment. There's the physical structure. Like, for instance, one of the things I've tried to push over the years is, like, why do we have tutoring and academic advising for freshmen in Arkansas? It ought to be in the student union someplace, an expanded student union, or the library in the middle of campus, so people can walk in and get help. And so there are physical limitations. When you think in terms of handicapped people, we have mobility. We don't have mobility or sight issues, but campuses have had to make a lot of changes to address it, and you're still not 100% compliant. Most campuses are not 100% compliant. They also talk about how do you do business. Well, you got to go here. Now you got to go here. Now you got to go here. Oh, you went to the wrong office first, and now you got to start all over. The way you arrange desks. In other words, do you put the person who's going to be greeting people behind a window, like a bank teller? Or do you have a desk with an open area where people can walk in and interact with each other? Those are all physical components. Do you put the tutoring center on the opposite end of the campus where people are not going to walk and they're not going to fight the car and it's raining, so I don't want to get wet? Or do you put, we used to have tutoring in the residence hall. We used to have freshman studies classes in the residence hall. When I taught the freshman studies class in Long Hall, when somebody's missing, I'd go find Michael. Come get his button club right now. But there are other people who were colleagues of mine say, well, if they don't want to be in college or they don't want to take class, they don't need to be here. No, I'm not willing to just toss somebody out there easy. It's easy to do nothing. It takes an effort to do something. When you talk about scheduling, most people who come from K through 12 don't have scheduling experience. Your counselors took care of that. If you had hovercraft parents, they took care of it with your counselors. Okay. When it comes time to paying bills, how many of you really know how to have a budget and pay bills when you're 18 years old? And so you have physical things. And I guess the big thing that came down is that how many of y'all are first people in this first generation college kids? First generation college. I promise you, you know a lot more about college operations today than you did when you first started. It used to be, that was the ivory tower. It was like the Emerald City. Follow the yellow brick road, you get to the Emerald City. But when you got to the Emerald City, it was a very complicated process. You were basically like they threw you in a pool of water and said swim. And if you're lucky enough to grab onto a side, you made it. If not, you just flunked out. And we brought in another freshman class to make up for you dropping out next year. And so, how does student affairs, what's student affairs role? The student affairs role becomes the difference maker in people's lives. The more complex the organization, the more organizational structure you have to have. But that doesn't mean that you can't be user friendly. Walmart makes it as complicated as doing how much I hate going to the shop. They do make it easy for you to check out. Because now you can check out on your own. But they're not doing that because they're going to think you're going to like it. They're doing it because they're going to reduce their personnel costs.
So now they have somebody standing at the door.
Which only
Stop
happens
you.
in Louisiana. Go to Walmart out of state.
Texas, they do it too.
In Oklahoma, they don't.
You know, if I self-checking, they take 2 people at the time. But that's why, because now they're going to steer you out. Oh, so now more people can really get sick.
Well, they think they can, so get parts for $1.59 liquid paper. We're going to talk about the age. We're going to talk about the age of accountability, chapter 5, and that's a really important chapter for you all to read. Make sure you pay attention to chapter 5. Not necessarily because it's going to be on the test, but because it's going to make a difference about the way you think about things. No, not because you're going to get it on the test. It's because if you're going to walk out of here and be able to use it, you're going to learn this semester. You have to understand. If somebody walks up to you and says, "Okay, you have this program, athletics. Let's get anybody an athlete. Athlete. Okay. There's going to be, people want to know why do things exist? What's going to be the expected outcome? What's going to be the benefit to the university and to students for offering to them? Well, the university offers students because it wants its retention rate to improve and it wants students to be successful. Because if they're here next semester, they're paying tuition. But they're not going to say that. They're not going to say we do this because we make more money if it's going for it. Because nobody wants to talk about money. But there's accountability. When the legislature approves budgets, they want to know is the money that they're investing, if the money they're investing having a good return. Like for instance, let's suppose we have a math teacher. There's 50 sections of 101 math. And you have 10 teachers teaching 5 sections. And 9 out of 10 teachers have a pass rate of 65%. But that 10 teacher has a pass rate of 12% for 5 years in a row. What do we do? Well, first you're going to see, do the people finish in the 65%, how do they do in the next class? Are they learning what they need to learn? That's the academic look at it. The financial look at it is, what is this person doing slaughtering these kids? And then there's a collegiate look at it where you say, let's let the faculty have a meeting and see if these other 9 can help this faculty member figure out a way to improve learning without as many students as families. We're not going to tell how to teach because you want math teachers to talk to math teachers. You want biology to interact with biology. But there's got to be a reason why these other 9 are having success much more higher. Because we don't pay people to hold class. We pay people to help students learn. Learn information, learn skills. And there's 2 types of skills. There's hard skills and there's soft skills. Somebody tell me what the difference is. what these books represent. Hard skills. Let me take athletic training. If somebody has a degree in athletic training, everybody's going to have to learn, I'm just going to throw some crazy things out, how to rap, how to do an analysis of conditions, if a patient, a client, when you have to engage certain protocols. That's hard skill. It's, can you apply in a professional manner what you do? The soft skills are, can you communicate with your patient? Did you give the person a chance to explain to you what was really going on, or did you just jump in and decide what was going on? And so soft skills are communication skills, people skills, organizational skills. The things that make the difference between, I always hear doctors that have good bed manners and doctors that are terrible. Well, it's the same thing in every profession. I actually had a student one time come to his kids, which is an elementary school major.
People actually go to like classes and stuff to learn soft skills because that's not like an easy thing for everybody to understand the communication side of a job or what you do there.
Put in a good program, you're going to be learning application of the knowledge and the use of the knowledge and information and the use and development of soft skills along the way. It's just like I have argued for years. And I'm not saying anything bad about our speech professors because they work hard and do a good job. But why do we have every major taking the same damn speech class? They ought to be taking a speech class professionally related to athletic training. Or why do you have to have somebody take a speech class if they're an education major? Because they're going to have lots of practice. It's sort of like it's almost ridiculous to require computer literacy. Try to find somebody that doesn't have a cell phone. What do you think that is? It's a computer. It's not a phone, it's a computer that allows you to make calls. Most people don't use it to make calls, they use it to communicate, look up information, gossip, text, tweet.
I remember from my own typing class I took in middle school. This was everything I need to know. To this day. Typing class,
Yeah.
the thing on the board, you can't see it. And at first you're kind of like, I don't even know. And then I was like, don't even look now. It's like maybe it was like
I was in college.
police.
1975.
It's
Old typewriters.
the students that be taking the notes after our guys and tricks on it.
That's what I see how big it's such a big skill that they teach you for it. They teach it out of the requirements. And I'm like, that's key. If you want to help your students, teach them typing skills. So many people have paid me to type their paper. It's already done.
The typical American college student doesn't want to do what you want them to do. They want to do what they think they need to do to get where they want to go as quick as they can get there. They don't like being told that speech class can really help you, or the typing class can really help you. And so the big dilemma in student affairs is, well, you're not going to give me what I want, so I'm going to go complain the same way. You just keep bumping it up and bumping it up and bumping it up. And presidents don't want to see them. So they send a message to them, tell them, get it straight. Take care of it. They're supposed to help students. Well, just telling students yes every time doesn't mean it's the best thing for them. Sometimes they need to be told, you know what, maybe we can miss the class 6 times and guess what? Your job as a student is to go to work, meaning go to class. If you're in a real job and you miss work 6 times, they'd have fired you. But we're not going to fire you because you're firing yourself. You're firing yourself by missing a chance to hear information explained, have discussions with your classmates and your teacher, and in some cases be able to explain how you understand something and learn whether it's correct or not.
But that was just for 5 or 6 years.
And then also part of it too is that we've made it so easy for people to give up. If I make a D or a CD and F on a test, I'm dropping it. I'm going to put it with aggravation. That's different from when you think safety book you're ready to get out to where you need to drop calculus. I can just give this flag. When I was in athletic training, that's in 3 years college, my mother died. I missed a week of school to go home to spend the funeral. Athletic training professor gave 2 pop tests and had a reading silver. No makeup, not here, you did 0. So I had actually 2 pop tests, and I still remember today looking in the face and saying, that's okay, because if you fail me, you have to tell everybody because I'm not the best grade in class. And I won't tell you the phone because it was relevant. And so there are rules, there are rules, there are rules. But there's also a lot of people that will use an excuse as a reason not to do well. And it's always somebody else's fault. But again, y'all gonna go to work in a student affairs capacity where everybody wants to be an exception, but yet you know what they really need to do, but they don't want to listen. It's like a lot of people don't listen to their doctor. They're coaching. Mm-hmm. And then they're lucky enough along the way where it's not really a difference. And then one key situation comes up, and they make the same mistake and it costs them in the team.
We could have made it but if they didn't listen, the past time that they went back, this time it actually matters.
Yeah, because you're playing against a high caliber. So accountability. What happened is that universities used to be judged and accredited based on did they have X number of library books in relation to the enrollment of the institution? Did they have the books necessary to support content-wise an accounting program, an athletic training program? Did they have the right number of ratio to advisors to students enrolled in the school? Now, that's not the case. People want to know what they're doing to improve or increase expected student outcomes. For each degree program, whether it's at Nichols or any other school in the country, is going to have expected learning outcomes. What are you supposed to be able to demonstrate knowledge of or skills of and be able to apply when you finish these experiences? Because remember, nobody requires 120 hours. That's just what the faculty have determined is needed to get a degree. Some degrees may require, to really do a good job, may require 160. Others might be able to do in 30, depending on the skill level of students. It's just like we have this habit where we want everybody to learn things at the same rate, at the same time. Why do we even have semesters? Why? Because people have to have a sense of structure, or some people are not going to push themselves to finish. I attended an individualized progress approach system school in St. Parish in the 1960s. Everybody didn't take the test the same day. You had choice. 5 times a week, you could go to class. You had to go to the class in each group. One of them had to be a lecture. One had to be small group discussion. One had to be independent learning. If you were really going to be going over the 3 concepts, not that, but in class. Then you can use the other 2 hours to catch up in classes and do helpful. If you got to the end of the year and you had not made progress enough to finish all 6 weeks worth of credit, you came back in August and you picked up where you left off. You didn't start at the beginning and wait your classes for the whole year. We had kids graduate in 3 years. We had kids that took a year and a half to pass algebra 2, but they passed it. Because what good does it do to tell a kid you failed and then they can do the whole thing over? It's a waste of resources. There's a college out there, St. John's University. There's no classes. There's no tests. They have 100 books they give you to read over a 4-year period. And then you appear before a group of faculty from different disciplines and they can ask you anything about any of those books and what they've had in your life and what you're doing to really different. With that, St. John's University. And who says that they're wrong? It depends on the level of readiness that your students are. All right? Not everybody needs to take Math 101. Some people should be in calculus, but they don't take 101 because they follow me for their degree program. That's crazy. By qualifying for calculus, They don't need one-on-one. I took calculus as a free elective, and the professor reading through the roll and goes, die, and do it. And they're like, 16 years ago, wait a second, what are you doing in here? I've never had a healthy community take calculus. What are you doing in here? And then, reading the lecture, but this calculus isn't really good math. And you just take his head, step down. And so, accreditation issues. I'm sorry, your question?
No, I just wanted to ask you about the institution.
Okay, we can get to that.
I need to go.
Okay, I'll get to it in a few minutes, but if you have to go, we can talk on the phone tomorrow or the next day or whatever. They have a handout with the syllabus that explains it, but I can go.
Yeah, I read the syllabus, but I feel the time.
We'll talk. Yeah, that's the last thing we do this semester. So the main thing is to get your annotated bibliography copy. Okay. But accrediting is done in one, you can use it, in one or two ways. It's either regional accreditation. There are 6 to 8 regional associations in the southern part of the United States. The Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, Commission on Colleges, and actually does the overall university accreditation. For admissions to receive federal funds, whether it's for research grants or for federal loan programs to build facilities or financial aid programs, Title IV programs, you have to be an accredited institution. And then there's specialized accreditation, just like the College of Education has professional accreditation in the discipline. The College of Business is AACSB accredited. And so each specialized profession can have its own specialized accreditation. But you're not required to have both, but Memphis is required to have accreditation for any program that it is eligible to have accreditation for. So we not only have SAC COC accreditation, and SAC accreditation standards, if you read the standards, are written in terms of expected student outcomes. Everything that happens comes back to fulfilling the mission of the school, fulfilling the training to go to the school. Is there a clear, convincing evaluation system in place that not only identifies measures, but or outcomes being met. And then they refer to CAS standards. I know I've mentioned that to you, and I think I attached the link. I'm just telling you, whenever you're bored on a day-to-day basis, go to the CAS website and make yourself familiar with CAS standards, because regardless of where you've been working in the United States, they're applicable. They have 14 components, I think, mission, vision, goals, and and if you participate or you have a CAS self-review process at your institution, your accrediting body is going to go, okay, if you prove you follow that, you're good. The admission, program, leadership, human resources, ethics, legal responsibility, equity and access, diversity, organization and management, campus and external relations, financial resources, technology, facilities and equipment, assessment and evaluation. It includes how you use the evaluation may be included in the other 13 areas. There's over 30 national professional associations in academics, student affairs, administrative affairs that have bought into this measurement system because it provides a common identity to showing that you truly have in place an effective assessment program. When you talk about CS implementation, CAS standards, accrediting associations leave you alone, it becomes a tool to use when you have to attend board meetings or program reviews. Like we have 5-year program reviews at Memphis. Every program has to go through a rigorous review process that faculty sit in judgment committee to make sure that the program is necessary, is doing what it's supposed to do, is achieving what it's supposed to achieve, is making progress, is still relevant, and has the right number of graduates to support the resources that are there. So the CAS standards will help prepare you for that. They started out in the Student Affairs Administration area first and have now moved into total operations of the university. Okay. Let's take about a 5-minute break, and we will come back, and the last thing we'll cover is the student personnel point of view. And those of you that don't have a book, if you want to review the book during the break,
use your case study, you can do that. Okay, what time is it?
6:30.
What do y'all do about 7:50?
You want? If we try to do it on.
If you didn't email it to me, you have a copy, you want to give it to me, you can give it to me.
I think it's a normal, but.
The first one is different.
I don't think I emailed it.
As you email me normally, they only last 45 minutes to an hour. Remember last semester, we didn't say that long.
It's easy. So it's hard.
It was just because your organization.
I didn't have them to do that because I feel like ready for this.
Think of the type of institution where you'd like to work when you finish this program. Is it going to be medical center? Is it going to be the university or K-12 system?
Probably university, but if I was maybe students can I relate this towards the
I would.
okay.
Everything you do in every class, you have a paper or project to keep first, you can eventually do practice and topic if you have to. But you don't have to. It's just that all of this that you do is going to help you prepare your interview for your practice.
We can just do something else for it. Like I want to do ER, for example, focus on like the master's program. So it's kind of like get into the circle of what is
You need to focus on the student services program relative to that book because it has to do with the administration of student programs and services. And so, what's the plan for learning? What is student assistance programs they have in their program? How do they get to practice and utilize the fees? And what other things they take? Gabrielle, you still there? I probably put it in. Since y'all are saving, I'll go ahead and start back. I'm not able to get out soon. If you ever want to borrow the copy, you're welcome to come get it after tonight. But this is what I call like the cliff notes of the Bible of student affairs, development student affairs. We already talked about the purposes and historical perspectives of education. The main thing is that you look at the program or administrative focus points. There's 23 of them in 1937 point of view. There's 2 more added in 49. The key is that the evolution of student affairs work and the level of work and the professional training required in the administration of programs and services has changed to reflect the changing student profile. The main difference between the 37 and the 49 is they've added education for democracy, education for international understanding, and education to solve social problems. Those were very timely because that happened in 1949, and then the expansion of colleges in the late 40s, and then we went through the early civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s. So it was a great time. The traditional purposes of higher education is to preserve, transmit, and create knowledge, but now it's also to encourage personal development and serve society. That's very different than what you're going to find if you look at the historical past. One thing that you'll find when you read through the document is that the ideas that they advocate in the document have remained relatively the same throughout history. It's just that their application of those ideas have changed. Everything always starts out with the academic mission of the institution is preeminent.
because basically, if the purpose is to develop, transmit, and preserve knowledge, that focuses on teaching, research for development in community and service. Everything that we do has to support that, or we have no purpose in doing it. Student affairs staff are expected to be experts on student and student development in their environment. There's going to be some chapters later in the book on student development theory. You need to make yourself familiar with those. You're not going to have a test on it for the purpose of this class, but at some point, maybe in your practicing defense, someone may ask, well, which student development theory most have you most identified that you'd like to practice? You don't know if they're going to ask, but they're going to ask a question about anything. And you should be able to explain the historical and theoretical implications of why you approach the profession. Every profession has to do it, whether it's athletic training, even in coaching. They have theories of administration that they follow in coaching. And so I think that if you read this perspective on student affairs, you'll find that it's moved from not just a focus on what the institution should be doing, but a focus on what the institution should be doing in relation to student development, individual student development. When we talked earlier about the large number of people that come to college and don't make it, I've never met a person yet, probably out of 500,000 people I've had to deal with over 43 years of life. I haven't met one that went to college to fail. And so one of three things that happen. Either they're not prepared mentally or social intelligence-wise. They're not ready for college and don't have a support system in place. Or the type of institution or environment that they chose doesn't match with their ability to cope and learn and feel a part and inclusion. Or the institution sold their goods and is not practicing what it teaches in the commissions and recruiting methods. Because remember, you're not open admission, you're selective admission. And most of the state universities are selective admission for Republicans. And they all have different degree programs. And just like someone can choose to go here, the interstate runs both ways. It runs east, west, north, and south. Students can choose different institutions. Everybody wants to be comfortable. Everybody wants to be in an environment that feels going to support them and help them. But I think that today's college student just has a lot more challenges to deal with. Not anything too complex, not anything different that you didn't have to deal with 40 years ago. It's just a different methodology. And process for handling. I jokingly tell people that kids are learning math and fifth grade is what they used to do for sophomore year of high school. There's information compression. But now the focus on education is not just know, it's how to use. And so if you're put in front of the president of the university or a board of trustees and they say, tell me what student affairs does and why you do it and what resources are needed at this institution to make it a successful experience for students, you have to be able to respond. Why do we have academic advisors? Faculty are academic people. Why can't they disregard it? They have it because you know the students that are freshmen are generally not going to take their first step somewhere that most have to be pushed, pulled, dragged. Nobody likes to admit they don't know what they want to do. Nobody wants to admit that they're failing. Nobody wants to feel a sense of disconnect to the campus. Because they're sitting around the cafeteria and listening, bragging about how well they're doing, and now I'm talking about how well they're doing, and they're involved in this, involved in that, and I'm involved in nothing, and I'm making D's and F's in my class. So I'm slowly going to quit and drop out of the environment, and then they're just going to show up the next semester. Have the capability, just needed some financial assistance, some skills coaching, and a little hard-nosed advice. Sometimes it's hard to tell people what they can and can't do. I couldn't be a brain surgeon if I wanted to do it. I don't have the knowledge and the skills or the ability to be one. But we don't like to tell people that. But I'm telling you, I've seen kid after kid after kid come in and need their math, and they're going to be an engineer. They can be, but they just have to understand it's going to be a little longer ride than 4 years. Before they have selected admission, 20% of the students who start in remedial education will finish a college degree. And not a 5. As the ACT got closer to 12, it got lower. If you had less than a 12 ACT, you basically had less than a 5% chance of finishing college in 6 years. That doesn't mean that you can't. It just means that when you finish your high school experience, you didn't have the preparation and knowledge to be successful. It's sort of like everybody can play volleyball, but they can't all play volleyball at the collegiate level. It doesn't mean they're not good and can't play and don't understand the game. And some people can't play, but they can coach really well. So coaching is just a different form of teaching. I call it practicing psychology.
It's hard for people to believe that they're focused on what people do not supposed to. But we also see that coaches that are supposed to. And so many ways to do it. I would do that.
Well, remember this. When I first interviewed for my first job to be assistant dean of student personnel at USL, I was finishing my master's degree in curriculum instruction and administration division with an emphasis in physical education and coaching. And so one question this woman asked me today: you spent your whole adult life preparing to be a coach. Why would you want a student affairs student personnel job? And my response was, it's coaching. It's coaching people in the game of life, and not just a sport. If it's taught right. So I'm going to leave it up to y'all and not go through the student personnel points of view, but I'm just telling you, this will give you a good grounded base for why you do what you do if you're going to work in student affairs. And I didn't want to give you a war textbook to read. I want to give you something that people would spend the time to. If you read this, it's going to take you at the most an hour. But I want you to notice how the profession has evolved. It's become more grounded in research. You're going to be expected to evaluate. You're going to have goals. You're going to be expected to evaluate. You're going to be expected to identify strengths, weaknesses, needs, and how resources can be added or changed to make you more successful. If you can't speak that jargon when you're out in the profession, then you're not going to last at university. Because when budgets get tight, if you're doing a really good job in student affairs, they don't look at you to cut as much as they would. Because they know you're important. Because you prove it over and over and over through plans, assessment, which shows clear results and progress. Okay. All right, questions about the syllabus and for the students? The only reason you don't have to do the sheet, I just found that if I don't get you to do something to identify quickly, some people procrastinate and they back themselves into a good corner. Because you're busy in life.